AutoKey and SetKey are two animation methods used to create keyframes. A keyframe records the state of an object at a specific moment in time. When you enable either mode, part of the interface turns red, indicating you are in animation mode. With AutoKey, most changes that take place on the selected object are animated on the fly. In this example, if you go to frame 30 and move the pawn to the next square, two keyframes are automatically created on the timeline. The motion is interpolated between the two keyframes, moving the pawn from point A to point B. If you repeat the procedure at frame 60, then again at frame 90, you will have a total of 4 keyframes. The pawn now moves horizontally across the chessboard. Next, you will make the pawn bounce between one square and another. At frame 15, move the pawn up on the z-axis. Then repeat the procedure at frames 45 and 75. Play back the animation. Notice that the bounce has a soft wavy effect. To rectify this, you need to use the curve editor. This can be done by right-clicking the selected object and choosing Curve Editor from the Quad menu. Many curves of different colors appear in the window. At this point, you are interested in the Z position track represented by a blue function curve. Notice the keys on level 0 and the soft and wavy curve going through them. You can select these keys at level 0 with the region selection and then set their tangent to fast mode to give the bounces more weight. Play back the animation. The pawn now bounces more convincingly. Exit AutoKey mode when done. SetKey mode works differently. It doesn't create keyframes automatically. You make the necessary changes to selected object first, and then manually create an animation keyframe. SetKey mode permits pose-to-pose animation, a technique mainly used in character animation. With a right-click in the viewport, unhide all to display the rook, the other character in our little drama. Before you start using SetKey, you need to select which states you want to animate on an object. In this case, the rook is attacked by the pawn and needs to flee the scene. You need to animate its position, but also its modifiers to add emotion. In the Key Filters menu, enable Position and Modifiers, and disable all other tracks. Only the Position track and the Modifiers tracks will now receive keyframes. In the first part of the animation, the rook notices the danger as the pawn approaches. Make sure the rook is selected and use the Bend modifier to achieve this. At frame 30, create a key representing the initial state. This is done by clicking the Set Keys button or by pressing K on the keyboard. This also prevents the rook from moving before that frame. At frame 37, change the bend angle to 50 and set a key. At frame 43, create another key without changing the bend values. This will pause the bend action for a few frames. At frame 50, return the bend angle back to 0 and create a key. Scrub the animation to see the results. At frame 60, select the Stretch modifier, change the stretch value to -0.7 and set a key. This simulates the anticipation of the jump as the rook flees the scene. At frame 67, set the stretch value to 0.7. Next, move the rook away from the danger area on the YZ plane higher and slightly away from the chessboard, and set a key. At frame 100, set the stretch value back to 0, and move the rook further down and away from the chessboard, and set a key. Exit SetKey mode, play back the animation, and watch the action unfold.